What if I told you there was a king in the Mahabharata who was impossible to kill? Because every time someone tore him into 2 pieces, he would join right back. Can you guess who am I talking about? Well, if you can, good for you. If you cannot, let me tell you, this was the infamous demon king of the kingdom of Magadha, Jarasandha or Jarasandha. We come across this particular character in chapters 20 to 24 of the Sabha Parva under the name of the Upaparva Jarasandha Vadha Parva. So that means this is very much part of the Mahakavya itself, though the story of King Jarasandha does exist as a unique individual standalone myth of its own, popularly known across all of Aryavata. Well, from the name of the very Upaparva itself, you understand that it was the slaying of Jarasandha that was actually the focus from where this story was important in the context of the Mahakavya. Jarasandha Vadha Parva, right? So the question that now comes to mind is, how do you kill a man who was born to be indestructible? How indestructible? Well, that takes us back to the story of his birth. The king of Magadha, Jarasandha's father, was King Rihadratha. He was a very pious man, did a lot of yagnas, was very known to be very humble and committed to the Brahmins and offered homages to the gods, etc. He was without an heir, and he had 2 wives, 2 queens, both of whom were princesses of Kashi. Now one day he was visited by the great sage Chanda Kaushika, and of course the king informed him of his dear plight, that he was his kingdom was without an heir, his throne was without an heir. To which of course the sage Chanda Kaushika came to a rescue. What did he do? He gave a mango to the king, and he told him that this was to be eaten by his queen so that then she would give birth to a child. Now of course the king had 2 wives, so what did he do? He tore the fruit up into 2 pieces and distributed amongst both of his wives. Now what happened? Of course both of them gave birth, but they both gave birth to half a child. Both the parts were born steel. Both the parts had an eye, a hand, a leg, meaning literally 2 pieces of a single body, because they were not, the fruit was in the first place not supposed to be broken into 2 pieces. It was supposed to be eaten single, and then it would give birth to a single healthy child. But nonetheless, fate had other plans, so what was born to Vrihadratha as an heir were not a child, but 2 pieces, 2 different pieces of a child. So then these 2 pieces were given away to the maid to be disposed of, but she did not. She just threw it outside the premises of the kingdom. And what happened was, this was then that a demon by the name of, a demoness by the name of Jora was passing nearby. And what did she do? She picked these 2 pieces up and thought that she was a cannibal, so she would eat them up later, but because it would be easier to carry them as one together, she put these 2 pieces together. And what happened was, magically this baby came into life, and it was a very powerful child, as hard as the diamond. The baby started crying out loud, which created a huge ruckus, so much so that even the king and the queens came out of the palace. And this is when Jora gifted the child back to them, telling that she was happy staying in the vicinity of this kingdom, and as a gift, as a token of her gratitude, she was giving this child back to its father. And how did the king then name the child? It was the demoness Jora who had put the two pieces together. The two pieces together joining Shondhi, which is the root Sanskrit word. So from there comes the name Jarasandha, the one put together back by the demoness by the name of Jara. Clear? Well, now that we have established the story of his birth and how the curious name Jarasandha came to be associated with this particular king, we come to the next episode across the pages of the Mahakavya when we come across references to this king once again. This is when we are going through the early years of young Lord Krishna's early pursuits. So he's still a young child, he's still a young boy. He has still not left Gokul, where he grew up as one of the foster children in the household of Mother Yashoda. And of course his parents, his biological parents, Vasudev and Devaki, they are imprisoned by his infamous maternal uncle Kamsa along with his maternal grandparents. And once Krishna comes to know about this, he decides to let go of his carefree life in Gokul and go to their rescue. Now what happens is, once he goes there, we all know the story that he slays Kamsa, frees his parents and frees his grandparents, and that is how he resurrects himself as the king of Dwarka. But what happens then is that by doing this, he gains an enemy for life, and this enemy is none other than the king of Magadha, Jarasandha. Why? Because Jarasandha's two daughters were married to Kamsa, which means once he was killed by Krishna, his daughters, Jarasandha's daughters, were widowed. And then the king Jarasandha decided that he is going to take revenge. He is going to avenge the widowhood of his two daughters. So what does he do? He becomes the forbidden enemy for Krishna, and he as much as 17 times attacks the kingdom of Mathura. Of course, luckily, all the 17 times he is defeated by Krishna, and eventually Krishna goes on to establish Dwarka as a well-secured, fortified capital. Right? Now we come to the last section, closer to the Vadha Parva of Jarasandha. This is when the Kauravas, Pandavas all are grown up, the feud has taken place, the entire question around who are going to inherit the throne of Hastinapur has come into being, and this is right when Indraprastha, the kingdom of the Pandavas, is in the process of being established, and the Pandavas are about to organize the Rajasuya Yagna. This is something we had also talked about in the last video. So in order to, why was the Rajasuya Yagna in the first place being conducted? Because this would establish the fact that all the other kings of the Indraprastha, the adjoining kingdoms of Indraprastha, are laying across their allegiances to King Yudhishthira, making him the Chakravarti Raja. And that would ensure that Indraprastha would spearhead the regal power of the empire across all of Aryavarta, right? But Jarasandha and his kingdom of Magadha was a serious obstacle in the path of this pursuit, because of a very serious and uncanny promise that this king had taken. What was his promise? That he would imprison as many as 100 Arya kings, and then he would kill them as a sacrifice to the demonic powers. That is how he would establish his supremacy. So he had already done that with 86 kings of Aryavarta when the Pandavas, particularly Bhima and Arjuna, under the guidance of Krishna, decide to visit Magadha. In clandestine pretense, meaning pretending to be under the garb of being someone else, hiding their original identity. They would visit Magadha and somehow engage Jarasandha in a duel, thereby killing him or slaying him and freeing all these kings, which would automatically mean that the allegiance of 86 kings would go over to Yudhishthira, to the Pandavas, and at the same time Jarasandha and his kingdom Magadha, the greatest obstacle in the path of this diplomatic project being established, would be erased as well. So now we are talking about hardcore politics in the pages of the Mahakavya. So what happens? Of course, Krishna being the great mastermind, the political mastermind behind the pursuits of the Pandavas, he says that Arjuna and Bhima should accompany him on this journey, and all of them took up the pretense of Brahmins, right? And so under the pretense of these Brahmins, they enter the city walls of the citadel of Magadha, and somehow they draw the attention of the king towards this impeachment of this, foolproof security of the city. So Jarasandha is provoked to step outside the premises of his palace and come face to face with these Brahmins. And of course, after a short span of conversation, the three pretentious Brahmins, they essentially come out with who they really are, meaning Krishna says, this is me being Krishna, and these are the two Pandava brothers, Bhimsena and Arjun, and we are here to challenge you. So to which Jarasandha chooses Bhima to be the most suited individual to enter into a duel with him. And this is when they start fighting, and the fighting goes on for as many as 16 days. And after this long 16 days of constant wrestling, it is finally in the final moments of this duel that Sri Krishna, in a very, very understated sort of signaling, he states it out to Bhima that the only way to kill this man, to kill this demon, was to tear him apart vertically, not horizontally, because every time Bhim tried to kill him by tearing him off horizontally, somehow, and this, remember, this duel was happening in the midst of a river, so there was current, there was a lot of water around which was in current, in a flow, right? So every time Bhim would to tear up the body of Jarasandha in two pieces and throw them apart, they would somehow come back and join. To which, of course, Krishna again came to rescue. He took up a piece of hay, you understand hay, right? And he tore it vertically, showing it, signaling it to Bhima that that's exactly how the body of Jarasandha needs to be torn off. So finally, in the final moments of the duel, what does Bhima do? He holds Jarasandha by his legs and tears him apart vertically into two pieces and throws him into two opposing directions of the current in the river so that they would flow away, and finally that is how Jarasandha was slain. And after that, of course, Magadha all the imprisoned kings in the prisons of Magadha were freed, which automatically brought that many number of supporters on the side of the Pandavas. You understand? This is classical diplomacy we are talking about. A very, very political scenario, annexation of new land, and ensuring that everything is put into perfect harmony so that possibility of a particular political equilibrium coming into being can be ensured. So once this is done, of course, Magadha is not left without a king. What do the Pandavas under the leadership of Krishna do? The two Pandava brothers, they reinstate Sahadeva, who is Jarasandha's surviving son, as the king of Magadha, which also means that now Magadha's allegiance under Sahadeva also goes to the Pandavas. And this automatically brought Magadha, the ancient kingdom, under the rule of Indraprastha, which was now the empire of the Pandavas. Well, that is the story of King Jarasandha from Mahabharata. I hope all of you liked watching this video. It was interesting enough for your attention, and I promise to come back with more such videos on Lead Genie. Please keep watching, like, subscribe, share, and help us spread this passion around our classical literature, around our classical texts, which we all should be so proud of. Thank you so much.